In an Air Force base in Alaska, a group of inmates is about to be transported to Washington. Prisoner Havelock is so dangerous that he's kept in chains and with his face covered. After the plane takes off, Havelock waits until everyone is distracted to spit out a fake tooth with a hidden tool and pick his handcuffs lock. Suddenly a side of the plane explodes and everyone screams in panic as it starts going down. Soon the plane begins to come apart and people are flying out to their deaths. While an inmate jumps on a guard to fight him for the keys, Havelock gets rid of his handcuffs. The prisoner slides down the plane and holds on to Havelock's leg, only for Havelock to take the keys before the man is blown away too. Nearby, Caleb and his father are camping when suddenly a foot lands in front of them. They look up and see the falling plane, so they start running to their car, which is destroyed by falling debris. On the plane, Havelock gets rid of the mask and other chains and begins to fight every guard, easily beating them all. The pilots concentrate on maneuvering the plane and manage to land it safely on the snow. As the plane catches on fire, the prisoners start running. In Fairbanks, the police station receives a call about some smoke up north. Since they can't get visuals, Marshal Frank's team takes the chopper to the area to investigate. They land as soon as they see the crashed plane and find a few bodies in the snow. Frank approaches a guard who turns out to be alive and whispers ambush. Suddenly the prisoners come out of hiding, so the team picks up the surviving guard and starts running. Unfortunately, a fight ensues and the officers have to defend themselves against the inmates. They pull out their guns and end up shooting a few men, but a cop is still stabbed several times. Frank keeps shooting inmates as the team drags the injured officer back to the helicopter. When Frank has to pause to reload, a prisoner takes the chance to tackle him. Frank almost gets killed, but at that moment plane guard Levi picks up the gun and shoots randomly. Although his eyes are damaged, he still brings the attacker down before two prisoners tackle him too. Frank immediately helps Levi and they rush to get in the helicopter, shooting and kicking any prisoners who try to come with them. In Virginia, Sydney is attending her niece's birthday party. The afternoon is interrupted when a bunch of CIA agents surround the house to pick Sydney up. They then take her to headquarters, where they inform her about the plane crash. Sydney is Havelock's former handler, so her mission is to capture him again. Back to Frank, he gathers more cops to inform them that dozens of dangerous criminals are on the loose, so he wants to lock down the valley. Then he checks on Levi and asks him what happened. Levi claims that Havelock got loose and sabotaged the plane, explaining that he was high priority and off book. Apparently the plane made an unscheduled stop to pick Havelock up and nobody asked any questions. At the local school, cops inform the staff and the students that they're placing a soft lockdown. However, Frank's son Luke is sneaking out with his girlfriend Kira, so they don't hear the announcement. Frank's wife Sarah keeps calling Luke but he ignores it. When the FBI arrives, they work with the cops to set up a base of operations near the forest to hunt down the 18 missing inmates. Sydney also arrives and privately explains to Frank that the plane was rerouted as part of a covert operation. Frank has a lot of questions since he thinks it's suspicious that the plane was this far north, but Sydney refuses to answer. However, when Frank brings up Havelock, she has no choice but to talk. Years ago, there were rumors of a mole in the CIA who was selling secrets to destroy the American government. The Department of Justice launched a task force to find him, but the mole was just a boogeyman created by the CIA as part of a covert operation called the Atwater Protocol. The agency created a handful of defectors who leaked intel to draw out enemies so they could be terminated. Sydney trained these men, including Havelock. He spent the last 2 years using intel to lure out and kill targets, but he disappeared last month. 2 days ago, Havelock was captured near the Sino-Russian border and the CIA was bringing him home when the plane crashed. Frank concludes that Havelock must have had a friend on the plane who set up the explosives. The conversation is interrupted by a call from a doctor. Frank rushes to the hospital and is devastated to learn that his stabbed co-worker died on the operating table. In the forest, Havelock finds a weather cabin, so he sneaks inside and steals a gun to surprise the owner. He ties the man up before stealing clothes and supplies. Meanwhile, Luke's car gets stuck in the snow, so he and Kira walk all the way to the cabin that Frank bought. They notice their phones don't have service, but they're happy to finally have their first time together. At the base, the team detects an SOS signal from the weather cabin and immediately sends some agents. The man's dogs hear vehicles and start barking, making Havelock realize that someone is coming. He then notices the radio and realizes that the weatherman asked for help, so he punches him. When the team enters the cabin, they find blood-stained bandages and the tied-up weatherman. Suddenly Havelock surprises half of the team from behind and quickly shoots down a few agents before fighting them to steal a weapon. By the time the other half of the team comes to check on their friends, they're dead and Havelock is gone. Frank runs outside and finds Havelock pointing a gun at the weatherman. While Frank tries to negotiate, Sydney releases one of the dogs. The animal immediately attacks Havelock and the weatherman doesn't call him back until he's done enough damage. Then Sydney looks at the body and is shocked to notice that this actually isn't Havelock. Later at the base, Sydney looks at the bodies and notices a man wearing a prisoner outfit, but he's actually an officer. It turns out Levi is the real Havelock and he changed clothes with a guard to disguise himself. He also faked his eye injury by using blood from other bodies. At the hospital, Sarah is called by Frank to warn her about Havelock, who overhears this and corners her. When the police finally arrive, Havelock and Sarah are gone. On his way back, Frank gets a call informing him that the school has lost Luke. Outside town, Havelock finds the cell tower and sets up a small bomb that cuts internet and cell service to the area. At the base, Sydney explains to Frank that she's desperate to find Havelock because the CIA will execute him and she'll likely be killed too because they think she helped him. If she finds him first, she can take him to the FBI to clear the story. Afterward, Frank gets ready for a press conference, only to discover there's no broadcast service. At that moment, Havelock's voice appears on the speakers, saying he doesn't trust the CIA or Sydney, but he does trust Frank. Havelock claims he'll change the world and Frank must cooperate if he doesn't want to lose Sarah. Then Frank talks to the reporters, asking them to spread the word in print to warn the public. On the road outside town, inmate Henry stops in front of a car and offers a bunch of money he's hidden inside his prosthetic arm, begging the driver to take him to the police. In the meantime, Sydney argues with Deputy Director Bradford on the phone and learns that Havelock hacked the agency's database, so he's acquired a classified file known as Archive 6. It's the CIA's inventory of every enemy they've terminated with lethal action under the Atwater Protocol, which would mean the downfall of the agency if it went public. Frank comes to yell at Sydney for not giving him answers, but he's interrupted by news of a neighbor seeing Sarah and Havelock at his house. The team rushes there and finds an abandoned camera in the basement but no tape. They theorize that Havelock came here to hack into the Marshal's database. He's also stolen Frank's gear and weapons. On the ground, Frank finds Sarah's wedding ring. Later, Sydney reveals she has Havelock's tape and plays it for Frank. Sarah appears on the screen saying that Havelock wants the inmate from seat 12A. If he's handed over, Sarah will be released. Frank must show up alone at 4 at a specific spot to do the exchange. After snapping at Sydney for hiding evidence, Frank searches for 12A's profile, which turns out to be Henry. He used to be a lawyer for criminals, but when he stole money from them, the mafia hunted him down and burned him until he lost his arms. A flashback shows Sydney attending a talk by Havelock about trust in the system. After the event, Sydney approached him and pretended to be part of a technological company. However, Havelock didn't believe her and guessed she was there to recruit him. He swore he had no interest in working for law enforcement and walked away. In the present, Frank tries to get information from Henry, who just mocks him. Frank furiously throws his prosthetic on the ground, so Henry spits on his face. When Frank pushes him against the cell wall, he reminds Henry that nobody knows he's there, so he'd better talk or they'll throw him in the snow. Afterward, Frank receives a mysterious envelope with a radio, which was sent by Havelock. Frank talks to Sydney, who tells him about Archive 6. Havelock needs Henry so he can sell that file to some dangerous people. Meanwhile, Havelock calls Bradford and sends her a link with a dead man switch countdown. If he doesn't enter a code into the site every 72 hours, Archive 6 will be released. When Bradford reports his superior, she's given 2 days to solve this. While Havelock is distracted, Sarah finds a deer's antler under the rug and uses it to break the tape, then she hides. When Havelock comes looking for her, she jumps on him and stabs him. Havelock still starts fighting her, so Sarah defends herself and picks up his gun. Unfortunately, Havelock easily disarms her and throws her down the stairs. At the base, Frank learns from the FBI that Henry handed himself over because he was promised witness protection in exchange for information. Henry confirms this and swears he doesn't know Havelock. Witness protection is his only chance to start a new life, so he wouldn't risk it for anyone. At 4, Frank goes to the meeting spot while his team hides in the woods. Instead of Henry, he's brought one of his men pretending to be him. Havelock keeps mocking him on the radio, and soon Frank realizes Havelock isn't there. All this is just a distraction. Sarah realizes he must be after the deck recorder from the flight, so the whole team rushes to go after him. At the bridge, Havelock intersects a police van and takes the memory card he needs. By the time the team arrives, Havelock is already gone. Sydney finds a bloodstained cooler that says for Frank and opens it to find Sarah's keys. He sends his team out to search the whole area for Havelock, but they only find Sarah's empty car. At the base, Henry is released to witness protection. In the forest, 3 inmates have taken Caleb and his dad hostage. As soon as the criminals look the other way, the father makes Caleb run. Moments later, a group of fishermen hears a noise and discovers Caleb unconscious on the snow. In the cabin, the teens find a shovel and return to the car, hoping to make it move. To their shock, they find Isaac sleeping in the trunk. They assume he's a wounded hiker and take him to the house. While Isaac sleeps by the fire, the couple goes to the first floor to dance. Outside, an officer sees the lights and calls Frank to inform him he's found Luke. Then the cop enters the cabin, only for Isaac to jump on him from behind. Luke hears a noise and comes downstairs, but Isaac has already gotten rid of the body. In the morning, the teens share some food and Isaac pretends to be a lost hunter with memory issues. Kira goes outside to get firewood and discovers an abandoned police car. When she looks inside, she finds all the inmate files, including Isaac's. Meanwhile, dozens of cops and dogs join the search for Havelock. This allows him to capture a few inmates too. At the base, Caleb has been dropped off by the fisherman. He tells Frank about his dad and points at the pictures on the files to identify the criminals, mentioning a river. In the forest, Havelock is found by the criminals and Caleb's dad. They grab his bag and discover a gun, but they don't know who he is. Havelock pretends to be a hiker and lets them take him hostage too. Nearby, the group finds a tourist buggy. The driver tries to take off as soon as he sees them, but the criminals shoot the guide in the arm. When the group enters the vehicle, the driver grabs his gun, but the inmates take a tourist hostage and force the driver to drop his weapon. Soon a message about the kidnapped buggy reaches the base with a picture of the inmates. Sydney realizes that if a phone found a signal, it means Havelock is there with his personal router. While they discuss how to proceed, Frank is informed that they've located Sarah. The team rushes to an old hunting shack and finds Sarah upstairs. She's immediately freed and Frank gives back the ring. At the base, the technicians keep trying to contact the buggy. The criminals don't let the driver answer, but Spencer realizes that the calls come from law enforcement. He rushes to find Havelock, who is using his laptop. Spencer points a gun at him and demands to know who he is, since it seems the feds have been looking for this buggy since before they could have known it was missing. After hacking into the CIA's database, Havelock closes his computer and attacks the inmates. He beats them up one by one, easily disarming them and overpowering them with his special agent training. Once he has all the guns, Havelock takes control of the buggy. At the base, Sydney calls Bradford to complain because all the evidence is being seized by the FBI. However, Bradford can't pull rank anymore. The CIA has learned that Sydney got a call from a burner phone before Havelock betrayed the agency, so now they think she helped him. Sydney denies it and hangs up, but a flashback shows her and Havelock in the same hotel during their last mission. Havelock knew the CIA would kill him soon and asked Sydney to spend time with him. Sydney's reminiscence is interrupted by Sarah, who tells her that Havelock printed some documents filled with numbers. Sarah wants to know why Havelock studied her home, so Sydney theorizes that he wants to manipulate and exploit Frank's weaknesses. At that moment, Havelock calls the base using the radio in the buggy, which allows the team to track the signal. Havelock announces he wants Sydney's Xenogate passcode, but Sydney refuses. She explains that Xenogate is a database with all the identities and locations of every asset she's developed in the field. Then Havelock shoots one of the inmates in the leg and threatens to start killing hostages, so Sydney has no choice but to give him the passcode. In the cabin, Kira secretly shows Luke the criminal files. The teens then try to leave, but Isaac has the car keys and the cop's gun. He forces Luke to call the base and tell his parents that he's safe with the officer, so they'll reunite soon. After Luke hangs up, Isaac destroys the radio. Afterward, Frank talks to Sydney, who informs him she doesn't have CIA support anymore. She also explains that the program that created Havelock was started by her father after 9/11. In return, Frank shares that his daughter died years ago and he blames himself for it. In the buggy, Frank sends a message to a mysterious contact saying there's trouble. At that moment, a police helicopter lands in front of the vehicle. Frank comes out and points out that the buggy will run out of fuel and food soon, so Havelock agrees to let him in to talk. When Frank asks for Caleb's father, Havelock lets him go. Then he mentions Frank's secret in the basement and says he's protected Frank, so now he owes him a favor. While the guys talk, Sydney connects a chain to the buggy. Suddenly the helicopter starts pulling the chain to lift the buggy, and Spencer falls out. The cops quickly surround him and capture him. One by one, the other inmates fall and are captured too. Havelock manages to stay inside and kicks Frank to stop him from taking his gun. Then he rushes to the driver's seat, but the cops are already surrounding the buggy as well. After some hesitation, Havelock decides to take off anyway. Frank jumps on him and starts fighting him for the gun. When the buggy is about to fall off a cliff, the chain pulls back and holds it over the edge. The helicopter is slowly sliding on the snow though. Havelock still wants to fight Frank, but in the struggle he slips off and lands on the back door. At that moment, Sydney arrives and points her gun at Havelock, but she doesn't dare to shoot. Havelock kicks the glass door to break it and jumps to escape. Sydney watches him while remembering their last mission again, revealing they got naughty. Later, Frank goes home and finds Havelock's message in a book. There's a hidden gun and a piece of paper that says our secret. Afterward, he meets with Sydney in a bar and shows her a SIM card he took from his printer. That means it has information about what Havelock printed. Sydney warns him about the dangers of going against Havelock and admits she's his wife. In the forest, inmate Kitty has her leg stuck in a bear trap. Her friend Vivian tries to free her but can't, so she leaves to get help. In a cabin nearby, a woman comes back from hunting and notices that someone has been eating her food. Suddenly, Vivian appears behind her with a stolen gun and forces her to come with her to the forest. When they find Kitty, the hunter opens the trap but also takes the chance to pull out a gun. Kitty immediately hits her with a rock to knock her out. Afterward, they take the body to the cabin, where they take care of their injuries and steal supplies. Vivian sees a car outside and realizes that the woman is a cop. When the officer wakes up and tries to reach for a knife, Kitty quickly kills her by suffocating her with plastic wrap. The base receives news of the murdered cop, so Frank and Sydney rush to the scene, only to discover that the FBI is already there. Frank gives them access to the trail cameras and they see Kitty and Vivian in the area. Kitty is a sick black widow who killed 5 men, but the $4 million she stole from them were never found. Vivian is a non-violent con woman who has been scamming people since she was 13. In the cabin's bathtub, Sydney finds a sweater Havelock stole from Frank's house, so she wonders if these women crossed paths with him. She thinks about their missions and remembers that Havelock told her that the agency found out about their relationship. It turns out their marriage started as a cover for a mission, but they decided to make it real. At a diner, Vivian and Kitty are having breakfast when they see a cop come in. Vivian makes Kitty leave through the bathroom, then she starts fake crying and tells the waitress that her mother isn't feeling well. The officer checks on her and notices a bottle of medicine with blood on the table. He then goes to the bathroom, but Kitty is already gone. While he's distracted, Vivian steals a car from the parking lot and the women escape. Meanwhile, Sarah's forced by her boss to go to therapy to deal with her recent trauma. Sarah admits she feels like a failure as a mother because she should be helping her son, so her therapist agrees to give her a ride. During the trip, she reveals she has a memory card from Havelock, and the therapist has to convince her that giving it to Frank is the right thing. When they arrive at the cabin, they find it empty. At the same time, Isaac and the teens escape in the cop's car. He says that the plane was designed to crash and that they weren't supposed to survive. When the car radio receives a message, Isaac shoots it and rips it off. Luke waits until it gets dark enough to unbuckle Isaac's seatbelt, then he drives off the road to make the car crash. In the morning, Luke wakes up and helps Kira come out of the car, then he makes her run away. When Isaac also wakes up, Luke grabs the gun and runs as well. In the forest, a native hunter finds Kira right before she collapses. He immediately takes her to his village to take care of her injuries. At the diner, Frank and Sydney are called to investigate the car theft. A witness saw the women using the phone, so Frank checks the phone book and notices that a page is missing. They search for that page in a new book and conclude that the inmates are after a tourist attraction called Arrow Excursions because they're looking for a pilot to escape the country. The team rushes to the Arrow office and discovers that the place was already broken into, but the women are gone. The computer password is on a sticky note, which means they got access to a list of 200 pilots. In the forest, Havelock surprises a hunter from behind and steals his bag, which includes a gun and car keys. He also takes the man's clothes and joins the hunting party. In the evening, he hangs out with other hunters and steals their car keys too. When the hunters can't find their keys, Havelock offers them a ride. At the hunter's house, Havelock throws a beer can at a guy's face. The other hunter pulls out a gun, but Havelock quickly grabs his arm and the shot hits the first man's leg instead. Havelock quickly ties them up before calling his contact Armin, who tells him the location of a courier. Soon Sydney gets a call from a friend in the CIA who tells her that Havelock used her account to contact Armin, an informant who specializes in malware and security protocols. The CIA stormed his apartment, but Havelock had already tipped him off, so it was empty. Security footage shows Armin giving a suitcase to a courier, so they conclude that he stole Archive 6 and sent it to Havelock in an external drive. Sydney's mission now is to intercept the courier. In town, Kitty and Vivian break into a pilot's home and tie him up. Kitty asks him to fly them to Canada and the pilot answers with insults, so Kitty grabs a hammer and hits his hand. Vivian immediately stops her, reminding her that he needs the hand to fly. The pilot agrees to help, however he needs money for fuel. Kitty gets his bank information and uses his computer to transfer the money, revealing that she hides the chip of her card on her glasses. When the women come close enough to his chair, the pilot pushes them and falls, which breaks the chair and frees his hands. He grabs the hammer and starts hitting Kitty's leg, but he must stop when she points a gun at him. Moments later the police burst in, however they only find Vivian. At the base, Vivian tells Frank and Sydney that she didn't see Havelock, she only found the sweater by the creek. Kitty took a bunch of supplies and left with the pilot, abandoning Vivian. She only agrees to talk after they promise a deal. When Kitty and the pilot finally get to his plane, they get ready to leave but find themselves surrounded by the police. Kitty tries to run away, only to collapse because she's very sick. She begs the cops to let her meet her end in the wild, but Frank arrests her anyway. Kitty then grabs some scissors from the cop's first aid kit and tries to attack, however Sydney shoots her down. At the base, Frank stops Vivian from leaving. She was the one who tipped off the cops about her location and has been manipulating Kitty since the beginning to steal her chip. Now the money is in Vivian's account. Frank only agrees to let her go if she tells them about Havelock, so Vivian admits she did get the sweater from him and that he said he was going to Fairbanks because he has unfinished business with an old friend. The police investigate all the people who arrived in Fairbanks recently and find a Russian guy named Vincent, whose paperwork is fake. At that moment Havelock calls Frank to taunt him while he searches Vincent's room. Frank manages to stall him long enough for the team to trace the call. Afterward the base gets 2 more calls, one from the natives telling them they found Kira, and Sarah informing them about the body in the cabin. Frank immediately goes to see Kira and shows her all the files until she points at Isaac. The file says that Isaac used to work for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency until he had a psychotic break that caused him to kill 6 federal employees. In the forest, Luke doesn't dare to shoot Isaac and becomes a hostage. When a trucker stops to check on the car crash, Isaac points the gun at him to get his keys. Then Isaac destroys the truck's radio and makes Luke drive off. Moments later Sarah and Frank show up and the driver tells them what road the truck took. At a substation in the mountains, Isaac destroys a bunch of cables in the power box. Then he makes Luke help him move a mysterious device that they take away in the truck. When Frank and Sarah arrive, the power box suddenly explodes. Thankfully they manage to hide just in time. This substation feeds electricity to a military research laboratory, so Frank concludes that it's Isaac's target. On the way to the lab, Sarah finally gives Frank the memory card from Havelock, explaining it has a recording of the plane crash. Frank gets furious because she hid evidence from him, so Sarah explains she's been trying to protect him since he's been letting Havelock manipulate him. Frank ignores her when he notices salt on the road, which means Luke has been leaving a trail for them. Meanwhile, Sydney and the team follow Havelock's call to a hotel, but he's already gone. They find Vincent's documents and a suitcase containing the archive. Sydney thinks it's suspicious that Havelock left it behind, but the FBI takes it away anyway. Afterward, Sydney goes to a bar and is startled by Havelock. He asks her to run together and gives her time to think about it. On his way out, he leaves his gun on the counter. In the evening, the truck bursts through the military facility's fence. Then Isaac makes Luke record him as he explains that the government is spying on everyone and he's here to stop them. Suddenly, Luke throws the camera at Isaac and destroys the special device. Isaac knocks him down and notices Luke's pallet expander, so he tries to pull it out because he assumes it's a surveillance bug. At that moment, Isaac hears a beeping sound and searches Luke's pockets until he finds his Tamagotchi. This distraction is enough for Luke to stab him in the leg and run away. At the same time, Frank arrives and sees Isaac going after his son, so he opens fire. Isaac rushes to catch Luke so he can use him as a shield. After Frank puts his gun down, Isaac lets Luke go, only to be run over by Sarah in the car and instantly drop dead. At the bar, Frank learns from an officer that the drive they found doesn't have state secrets, only a series of navigational prompts used in avionics. Frank remembers that Vincent arrived before the plane crashed, and the only ones who knew the plane's route was the CIA. He concludes that Vincent was sent by the CIA with a drive full of malware to bring down the plane on purpose. Afterward, another officer finds Isaac's old videos. He targeted that specific lab because it has a switch that may overload the energy network if it doesn't receive a signal in time. Frank thinks they have time to prevent it, but at that moment the power goes down in the whole town. On the road, inmate William pretends to be a victim of a car crash. When a paramedic comes to check on him, William quickly stabs him to kill him. Then he goes to the ambulance and knocks down the other paramedic with the defibrillator. After sedating her with an injection, he steals the ambulance. Now he can find a sick man hiding in the forest and give him some medicine to keep him alive. Moments later, William shows up at the hospital pretending to be a paramedic. Sarah sees him and doesn't recognize him as part of the staff, so she calls Frank to tell him she may have one of the inmates. Frank and Sydney immediately head to the hospital and look at the files to find William. He's a real doctor who poisoned 36 of his patients, and the plane was taking him to his execution. In the hospital elevator, William threatens a doctor with a scalpel and asks her to call the air ambulance. When they come out, Sarah intercepts them in the corridor. William discreetly pulls out some scissors, but Sarah sees him and pushes him, allowing the other doctor to run. Then William tries to threaten the paramedic, but Frank appears behind him and hits him to capture him. At the base, William tells the cops that the plane pilot is still alive and he hid him in the forest. He'll tell them where he is if his bank manager brings him his deposit box. They have to move fast or the pilot will die alone. The team immediately goes to the forest with the dogs but only manages to find the other paramedic's body. Then Sydney talks to Frank in private to explain that the plane was brought down by the CIA on purpose. She knows this because years ago she used the same tactic to kill a high-profile Chinese diplomat. If the FBI finds the malware in the drive, they'll blame her for everything, so she needs to catch Havelock to clear her name. The bank manager has the box, but her plane can't come to town because there's still no power and therefore no landing lights. The team isn't sure if they should use extra resources to look for what may be a lie, so Frank calls Havelock, who confirms he saw the pilot alive. While Frank sends the search team out again, Havelock contacts another criminal to arrange a meeting. Moments later, the team finishes analyzing Frank's call with Havelock. Bells can be heard in the background, which means Havelock is near the clock tower. There's an abandoned theater there that would make the perfect hiding spot. At the theater, Vincent arrives first and steps on some broken light bulbs, which alert Havelock to an intruder. Soon the cops also show up and search the building until they find Vincent chasing Havelock, but they disappear into a hatch in the floor. Havelock wants to interrogate Vincent about the plane, however he hears the cops coming so he has to run away. The team ends up arresting Vincent. Afterward, Frank sends a message to the local radio station to ask all the citizens for help. Soon several cars are standing in line at a farm to create a well-illuminated runway so the plane with the bank manager can finally land. When William sees the box, he tells the cops where to find the pilot, who is finally rescued. William opens the box and finds pictures of all his victims. The bank manager is the mother of a boy William killed, so he hands her the picture and says he saved him from cancer. The furious woman pulls out a gun and shoots William to kill him. Meanwhile, Havelock thinks about Sydney. One day they argued because the agency asked him to kill one of their informants, but he helped her escape instead. Sydney was angry because now the woman's family was in danger, and Havelock thought she defended the corrupt system too much. He snapped out of his thoughts by his radio. It turns out he hid a microphone in Vincent and now he can spy on his interrogation. An officer has researched Vincent and couldn't find anything about him except for a single accidental picture in the newspaper. When the pilot wakes up, he explains that he lost control of the plane because the system had been corrupted. They would have crashed badly if Havelock hadn't forced the plane into manual reversion for a smoother landing. Afterward, Frank receives a call from the FBI informing him they've found the malware in the drive. Sydney has a breakdown because between this and the pilot's testimony, they have enough to blame her for everything. When Frank goes home, he finds Luke searching the basement. Thankfully, he finds nothing because the gun is in the book. A flashback reveals that 4 years ago, Frank was out with his kids when a criminal in a car opened fire at them. Frank was only injured, but his daughter died in his arms. In the present, the cops catch another inmate, who starts fighting everyone in the base. Frank tries to stop him, but the criminal easily overpowers him and brings him down. When the inmate is about to kill Frank, the power comes back. The man is standing on water near broken cables, so he's immediately electrocuted to death. Now there are only 2 inmates left to catch. Meanwhile, Bradford is told that the police have Vincent, so she needs to do something before they make him talk. Then her IT agent informs her that she's managed to hack into Havelock's kill switch, so he can't access it anymore. When Havelock discovers this, he destroys his room in fury. At the base, the scanners are working again and soon a strange signal is detected. Sydney rushes to check Vincent and finds the hidden bug, but she thinks it belongs to the CIA. When Frank goes home, Sarah and Luke confront him because they've found the gun in the book. Frank explains that years ago he was chasing a fugitive called Patty. He was known for several crimes, but the police only had evidence for one particular murder thanks to this gun. Unfortunately, the gun had another person's fingerprints, so Patty was innocent of this one thing. Frank didn't want to let him loose because he knew Patty would still kill, so he hid the gun and Patty was convicted. Frank and his daughter were shot by Patty's gang in revenge. Luke yells at Frank in fury, blaming him for his sister's death. Later at the base, the team confirms that the bug actually belongs to Havelock, who is hiding in a fire tower in the forest. The team decides to head there on horses so Havelock won't hear them coming. In the woods, the cops find one of the missing inmates and a chase ensues. The criminal wastes his last few bullets and tries to run, but Frank easily catches up to him and knocks him down to arrest him. In town, Jamal comes home after a day at work in the National Security Agency. Suddenly Havelock jumps on him and asks for help to get his data back. By the time the team reaches the tower, Havelock is already gone. But since he left in a hurry, they found his computer and Jamal's profile. Sydney and Frank immediately go to town, but the FBI has reached Jamal first. Frank ends up arguing with an agent and gets in a fight that gets him kicked out. In private, a friend of Frank informs him that the feds found a picture of a ship. Sydney recognizes it as a vessel from the government's intelligence gathering program. At sea, Havelock uses a boat to reach that ship and sneaks around to bring down the staff. In just a few minutes, he knocks half of them out and locks up the rest. Then he enters the control room, where he uses the powerful computer to download the archive onto a disk. Meanwhile, Sydney and Frank are flying to the ship. However, they receive a message informing them that Havelock has already left. On the harbor, Havelock steals a car to escape. Soon Frank and Sydney begin following him on the plane, flying too close to his car to try to force him to stop. This causes the vehicle to overturn and roll down the road. The car catches on fire, so Sydney runs to pull Havelock out before it explodes. At the base, Frank learns that the last inmate escaped to Tulsa, so he's Oklahoma's problem now. After Sydney leaves with Havelock and the FBI, Frank goes home and finds a letter from his family telling him they'll be staying with an aunt for a few days. While looking at a picture of his daughter, Frank realizes that the only photo of Vincent also had a little girl. He goes online to look at old pictures of Sydney and discovers that the little girl was her. Her father is also in the photo because he trained Vincent. It turns out Sydney has been lying all along and she downed the plane with Vincent's help. In a van on the road, Havelock tells Sydney that he knows the truth. A flashback reveals that while Frank wasn't around, Sydney talked to Vincent about their plan, which was overheard by Havelock through the bug. Havelock calls Sydney a murderer and says that killing him won't get her what she wants. At that moment, Frank contacts the FBI and tells them to keep Sydney apart from Havelock. Sydney immediately points a gun at Havelock, who pushes her off. A fight ensues inside the van and the driver loses control, so the vehicle behind them has to make a sudden move to dodge it. This causes it to crash. As the fight continues, Sydney accidentally shoots the driver, and the van crashes into the car in front of it. The first one to wake up is Sydney, who points her gun at Havelock. A flashback shows the couple in Paris a month ago. Havelock wanted them to have a future together, but he thought the CIA would kill them when they didn't need them anymore. He said they should run away together, but Sydney thought it was a bad idea. At the office, Sydney met Voss, a Russian spy recently captured by the CIA. Voss was wanted by his own government, so he wanted Sydney to get him safe passage. In exchange, he'd reveal what really happened to her dad, because the official story was a lie. Sydney made her team kill the cameras and delete all the files, not wanting the agency to take him away. Voss then showed her a drawing Sydney had given her father, which he always kept in his wallet. This proved his story, but he wouldn't say more until Sydney took him out of Paris. Suddenly a group of Russians burst into the office and killed Sydney's team. Voss punched a guy before closing the door, getting shot in the process. Sydney mixed some cleaning products to make a small bomb and waited until the mercenaries broke the window to throw it at them. The explosion brought them all down and Sydney escaped with Voss. Outside, Voss admitted he was the one who killed her father. Sydney decided to run away, abandoning Voss. Later Sydney shared what happened with Havelock, who told her not to report this to Bradford because he thought the CIA was hiding things from them. He then revealed that he did some investigation and found a secret server with Archive-6, which was created by Sydney's father 20 years ago and was still active. Sydney disapproved of his methods and instead wanted to talk to the woman in charge of arranging cover jobs. The next day the couple cornered the lady in a church. She confirmed that there was a secret behind the death of Sydney's father, but she refused to say more and told the couple to walk away from something so dangerous as Archive-6. Havelock told Sydney to go back to work and pretend she hadn't heard from him while he searched Archive-6 for answers. Bradford asked Sydney if she knew anything about Voss' death or Havelock's whereabouts and Sydney denied it, but Bradford could tell she was lying. When Sydney reunited with Havelock, he showed her the files he found in Archive-6, which confirmed that the CIA had been killing all the agents from the Atwater Protocol after their job was done. In fact, Sydney's father had been the first victim. Havelock insisted they should run away together, but Sydney wanted to stay and expose all this. Afterward Sydney visited his mother, who showed her the old newspaper picture and told her to search for that man. In New York, Sydney met Vincent, who used to be her father's interpreter. He explained that her father designed the Atwater Protocol as a last resort program, but Bradford started to abuse it to get rid of all the enemies and even profit from it. When Sydney's father began to gather evidence of Bradford's plans, the agency killed him. When Sydney returned to the office, she learned that Bradford knew that Havelock hacked the system and wanted to capture him. Sydney immediately called Havelock, who confirmed he killed a team that went after him. He told her that their only option was to run away and asked her to meet her at a hotel. After being interrogated for hours, Sydney called Havelock and told him she chose to stay because she wanted to finish her father's job. At that moment the CIA burst into the hotel and captured Havelock, so Sydney heard them beating him up. Afterward Sydney met with Vincent to make a plan. She knew that Havelock would be executed, so she had to kill him before the CIA to activate the kill switch and release Archive-6. Since Sydney was still under Bradford's suspicious watch, she sent Vincent to get the malware from Armin and use it on the plane. In the present, Sydney finishes sharing her plan with Havelock, who informs her that Bradford's team has already deactivated the switch. Sydney calls Bradford to confirm this and Bradford assures her that the CIA is going after her too. Then Havelock reveals he made a copy of the archive in the ship, which he pulls out of his stomach. Sydney immediately takes the disc for herself. When Frank arrives at the crash scene, he only finds Havelock and the agents' bodies. After he handcuffs Havelock, Frank gets a call from Sydney, who is currently running through the forest. She apologizes for the mess and asks him to leave because getting involved will put him in danger. Frank doesn't care and swears to find her anyway, so Sydney throws away her phone. Soon Bradford arrives in Alaska and sends out a team of agents to kill Sydney and Havelock. At the base, Frank demands an explanation, so Havelock tells him everything. He also warns him that Bradford won't arrest Sydney, she'll kill her on sight. Afterward Frank sends his team to find Sydney, and soon the entire town is covered with posters of her face. Later Bradford shows up at the base and wants to take Havelock and Vincent away. However, Frank reminds her that the CIA has no legal jurisdiction in America, so he won't cooperate unless she brings a court order. At the local pharmacy, Sydney gets some sunglasses and hair dye. Another customer sees her and immediately calls the police. Frank's team rushes to the store and talks to the cashier, but Bradford goes to the back door and learns from another employee that Sydney left with her coworker. Bradford's men immediately capture the guy and take him away to interrogate him. After the employee tells them that he gave Sydney directions to the train station, Bradford abandons him on the road. At the base, a cop enters the cell to beat Havelock up, blaming him for the dead officers. Suddenly Havelock pulls out a grenade he's created using grease and an apple. The officer believes it's real and doesn't fight back when Havelock takes his gun and uniform. Then Havelock visits Vincent, giving him the handcuffs, key and a gun while asking him to help him save Sydney. When Vincent is taken out of his cell, he drops the handcuffs and takes a cop hostage with the gun. This distraction allows Havelock to escape, and Vincent surrenders after his friend is gone. At the train station, Sydney sees the agents arrive and sneaks into the train to avoid them. The agents soon come aboard too and start searching every car. Sydney takes off her wig to replace it with a cap. When an agent corners her against the door, she shoots him and beats him up. Then she uses him as a shield while shooting a few more agents. More men come after her and a fight ensues, so Sydney has to beat them up too and get a new hostage. At the next station, Sydney manages to escape. An agent calls Bradford to tell her that Sydney got off at Healy, and Bradford realizes she's going to the hydroelectric dam. Since that place powers the Army's training facility, Sydney will find a powerful computer to upload Archive-6. Frank's agent friend calls him and lets him know about the dam. Frank points out that an experienced agent like Sydney would never let others see her in a store or on the train, so he concludes she did it on purpose. At the dam, Sydney picks a lock and enters a building, only to be surrounded by the CIA. Bradford is smug about her victory, but Sydney tells her she wanted to be followed. At that moment Havelock enters the room and starts arguing with Bradford about the agents she's killed, getting her to admit the truth. Suddenly a bunch of men rappels down to surround the group. They're the shadow operatives that Bradford has been using as pawns and killing when she didn't need them anymore. After hearing her confession, they're on Sydney and Havelock's side. Sydney announces she'll upload the archive and leaves the room. A desperate Bradford starts begging for mercy, getting close enough to an agent to steal his knife and kill him. This triggers a fight, so now both teams are shooting at each other in utter chaos. Havelock manages to dodge a gas grenade and takes cover, but agents keep following, so he has to kill them all one by one. A man corners him and almost shoots him, however Frank arrives and kills the guy first. In the control room, Sydney begins uploading Archive 6. Bradford comes after her but fails to shoot her through the window, so she shuts down the system. Then Bradford breaks the control room door open with an axe and Sydney jumps on her to start a fight. After exchanging a few hits, Sydney grabs the disc and runs to the bridge outside, but Bradford follows her to stab her. After picking up the fallen disc, Bradford uses some cables to start choking Sydney, who fights back and causes them to slip over the railing. They avoid falling by holding onto the cables, and Sydney reaches into Bradford's pocket to retrieve the disc. Then Sydney grabs onto the railing and kicks Bradford, making her fall to her death. When Sydney's fingers are about to slip off, Havelock catches her. Frank and Havelock take Sydney to a vehicle outside. Before they take her away to the nearest clinic, she asks Havelock to finish the job. Havelock rushes back inside and Frank immediately follows him, triggering another chase. After a few twists and turns, Frank corners Havelock at gunpoint and says the end doesn't justify the means. Havelock reminds him that bringing down Bradford has saved many lives, which is the same thing Frank did with Patty years ago. Frank hesitates, and Havelock takes the chance to escape. Afterward, Frank goes to the clinic and learns that Sydney is in a bad state. She needs a blood transfusion, which this small clinic can't provide. Frank decides to take her to the hospital, even if there's a chance she won't survive the trip. The locals lend him a sleigh and soon a group of dogs is dragging them down the road. Moments later they meet with a hunter near the forest. However, the man refuses to help Sydney because she caused so many deaths. Frank opens the car and finds lots of empty beer bottles, so he could arrest the hunter for drinking and driving. To avoid this, the hunter lets him have the car. In the evening, they finally make it to the hospital. Before Sydney is taken to the operating room, she gives Frank the disc. The next morning Frank is called to a car crash scene because the cops claim they found Havelock. The body is too charred to do a DNA test, but he's missing the same tooth he lost in the plane. Later Frank meets with a trustworthy politician he knows and gives him the disc, telling him to do a thorough investigation so the truth can finally see the light. When Sydney finally wakes up, Frank visits her and tells her that Havelock has been declared dead, but he thinks the body belongs to another person. Sydney shares how guilty she feels about all the deaths and Frank tries to assure her she did what she could, but she doesn't listen and kicks him out. At home, Frank reunites with his family and tells them he's ready to turn himself in. However, Sarah and Luke convince him they just need to start over as a family, so Frank throws the gun into the river. Sometime later Frank gets a call from Havelock. The charred body he used belonged to the last inmate, who never made it to Oklahoma. Frank is willing to let Havelock go as long as he stays out of trouble, but Havelock says that Alaska is the center of everything and this isn't over. When Sydney is escorted out of the hospital in handcuffs, she's smiling because she can see Havelock and his friends nearby, ready to rescue her. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.